And that's where they say Eisenhower made a deal with these aliens.
What was weird about Antarctica?
Antarctica.
The Antarctica?
Picture this. Antarctica. A land so cold, so empty, it feels like another planet.
They are clearly protecting or preserving something that may or may not be under 3 miles thickest of ice.
It looked alien.
No villages, no farms, no graveyards. And yet, a human skull emerges from the frozen shore, as if the ice itself had decided to give it back. Not the remains of a modern explorer. Not a 20th century scientist. This was a young woman who died here decades before Antarctica was even on the map. So what was she doing on the most inaccessible continent on Earth? Was she a castaway? Or part of a voyage history refuses to remember? Did she arrive by ship? Or by some means we can't yet explain? And here's the strangest question of all. Why does the site where she was found have no record of her, or anyone, being there? To uncover her story, we'll step into a no-go zone guarded by international law, trace whispers of lost expeditions that never made the history books, and face a possibility that makes some scientists uneasy. Maybe Antarctica has been visited more times, and by more kinds of visitors, than we've been told. Because if a human body could hide here for centuries, what else might be waiting under that ice? Watching us back. Antarctica is unlike anywhere else on Earth, and in some ways, it barely feels like Earth at all. A white expanse the size of the United States and Mexico combined, ringed by the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the fastest, most relentless ocean current on the planet. A liquid wall that has isolated this place for more than 30 million years. Here, katabatic winds scream down from the high polar plateau at over 200 miles per hour, sharp enough to scour paint off metal. Winter temperatures plunge below minus 60 degrees Celsius, minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to shatter steel if it's brittle. Even in summer, the sun's light feels alien, filtered through a haze of ice crystals that bend it into strange halos and arcs. It's a continent with no native humans, no permanent cities, no ancient ruins, at least none we've been told about. The first official human sighting wasn't until 1820. Yet the woman found on Yamana Beach had already been dead for years. So either history is missing a chapter, or this frozen wilderness has been visited in ways, and by visitors, that leave no trace but a single misplaced skull. If Antarctica can hide her, what else could it be hiding in the silence between its storms? Stay with us here on Stone and Bone, and if you value the hours of digging and research we pour into uncovering these hidden histories, hit like and subscribe, so you're here for the next discovery that challenges everything we thought we knew. Centuries before any ship officially charted Antarctica's frozen cliffs, the idea of a great southern land haunted human imagination. Ancient geographers called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. A vast, unseen continent they believed must exist to balance the world. Some maps placed it far beyond known seas, drawn with coastlines that no sailor of the time had supposedly ever seen. The most famous, the Peary Race Map of 1513, hints at a southern shoreline, ice-free, as if copied from an even older source. Critics dismiss it. Others quietly ask who mapped what they couldn't reach. The legends don't stop there. Polynesian oral histories speak of master navigators like Hoi Taniora, who sailed into a realm of endless fog and a sun that barely rose above the horizon. He described towering white cliffs rising from the sea, icebergs perhaps, or something stranger. The Polynesians crossed thousands of miles of open ocean without metal ships, GPS, or modern maps, guided only by the stars, the waves, and the flight of birds. If they could find Easter Island, New Zealand, and Hawaii, could they have reached the shadow of Antarctica? Or something lying just beyond it? There are no artifacts, no written records, only fragments of memory, passed through generations. But when a young woman's skull surfaced on a remote Antarctic beach in 1985, those legends began to feel less like myths and more like warnings. By the early 1800s, the world's hunger for resources was driving ships into places sailors once swore they'd never return from. Sealing and whaling crews were pushing farther south each season, chasing fortunes in fur and oil. The oceans below South America were treacherous. Ice-choked waters, storms that could splinter a hull, and currents that could drag a vessel into oblivion. Official history marks 1820 as the year Antarctica was first seen, when Russian Captain Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen described a shore of ice towering above the sea. British and American ships soon claimed their own sightings. But there's a gap in that neat record. Unofficial voyages, the kind driven by profit, not prestige, left no fanfare, no government archives, no speeches before Parliament. These crews had every reason to keep their routes secret. And if they lost men, or passengers, or something else along the way, no one beyond the ship would ever know. And here's the thing about the Southern Ocean. It doesn't give back what it takes, unless it wants to, which makes what happened on a remote Antarctic beach in 1985 feel less like an accident, and more like the ice deciding it was time for someone to notice. January 7th, 1985. The Antarctic summer. A brief, deceptive season where the ice loosens its grip, but the air still bites like a blade. On Livingston Island, a jagged outpost in the South Shetland Islands, Chilean scientist Daniel Torres Navarro was combing Yamana Beach for marine debris. The wind was constant, a low howl over the crash of waves. Icebergs drifted in the distance, groaning as they broke apart. Torres bent to pick up what he thought was a weathered shell, then froze, pale bone. A curve too delicate, too deliberate to be anything from a seal or bird. He knelt, brushing away the gritty sand until the shape emerged. The parieto-occipital portion of a human skull. It was stained green from microalgae, but intact, almost defiant against decades of storms. More fragments followed, part of the upper jaw with teeth still locked in place. The jawbone itself was gone. 2 central incisors were missing, as if taken by the sea or by something else entirely. When the fragments were dated, they returned an impossible answer. Between 1819 and 1825, years before Antarctica's official discovery. Forensic analysis suggested she was young, likely South American, of mixed indigenous and European ancestry. A mestiza woman, thousands of miles from any known settlement, lying on a beach no human should have walked in her lifetime. Whatever happened to her, she hadn't just slipped through history. She'd fallen through its cracks, and now those cracks were widening. You might expect a discovery like this to explode across the headlines, the oldest known human remains in Antarctica. But outside a small circle of scientists, almost no one has ever seen what Daniel Torres found. Only one photograph of the restored skull has ever been published. Buried in a 1999 scientific journal few outside academia would ever read. It's not because the image was lost. It's because the site itself is locked behind layers of law. Yamana Beach sits within Antarctic Specially Protected Area, number 149, a zone guarded under the Antarctic Treaty System. Here, every grain of sand, every bone, every fossil is shielded from disturbance. Access is tightly controlled. Photography of human remains is restricted. Even researchers must tread lightly, leaving the site exactly as they found it. The rules are there to preserve dignity, to protect the environment. But they also mean the outside world sees almost nothing. No close-up images, no detailed public maps, just fragments of a story we're not allowed to fully touch. And in the years after that first discovery, the ice still had more to reveal, whether we were ready for it or not. Eight years later, January 14th, 1993. Daniel Torres was back on Yamana Beach, this time to observe first seals. But the ice has a way of repeating itself. As he walked near the original find, something jutted from the sand, long, pale, and unmistakably human. It was a femur, 221 millimeters in length, the same size and build as another femur recovered in 1988 from the same beach. Both matched the proportions of the woman whose skull had surfaced 8 years earlier. The Antarctic coast is restless. Tides and storms rearrange everything. Scavenging seabirds can scatter bones across hundreds of meters. Whatever had happened to her body, it had been slowly coming apart in the open air, piece by piece, decade by decade. In 1987, the University of Chile had dug a 3 by 3 meter trench, sifting every layer of soil down to 80 centimeters. They found nothing. The rest of her, if it still existed, was either carried away by the ocean or buried so deep the beach would have to give itself up to find her. Today, her restored skull sits in the Instituto Antártico Chileno, silent, untested, waiting for a science that might one day pull her story from the frozen edge of the world. From the beginning, scientists knew DNA was the key. If they could pull even a fragment of genetic code from her bones, they could confirm whether the skull and femurs belonged to the same woman, and maybe trace her ancestry back to a specific community or coastline. Antarctica, on paper, should have been perfect for preservation. Cold slows decay, sealing in microscopic clues for centuries. But these bones hadn't been locked away in deep permafrost. They'd been lying on a coastal beach, exposed to salt spray, storms, and perhaps even submerged in the ocean for years. Salt water is merciless. It seeps into bone, breaking apart DNA until nothing usable remains. Even with the leaps in ancient DNA recovery we've seen in the last decade, where scientists have sequenced Neanderthal genomes in mammoths frozen for tens of thousands of years, marine exposure is still a killer. Torres and his colleagues hope to attempt extraction. Whether those tests were never completed, failed entirely, or remain unpublished is a mystery in itself. No ancestry results have been shared, no confirmation that all the bones belong to one person. Just silence. And that silence leaves space for the strangest questions. If her DNA is gone forever, what other evidence could tell us who she was? And how she got to the edge of the world before anyone else? With no personal artifacts, no ship's log, and no DNA, her story survives only in theories. Some grounded in history, others whispered in the margins. Theory 1. The Sealing Voyage. In the early 1800s, sealing ships pushed farther south each year, chasing dwindling fur seal colonies. She could have been part of one such voyage, a worker, a stowaway, or an indigenous Yagan or Mapuche woman brought for her knowledge of the southern seas. Illness, injury, or conflict might have ended her life, with the crew burying her on shore, or abandoning her to the cold. Theory 2. Burial at sea. Gone astray. It was common practice to commit the dead to the ocean, sewn into canvas, weighted with stones. Perhaps she died far from Antarctica, only for the Southern Ocean's chaotic currents to deliver her body to Yamana Beach, where storms and seabirds scattered the bones. Theory 3. Unrecorded indigenous exploration. The Yagan navigated freezing channels in bark canoes for thousands of years. Could small, undocumented expeditions have skirted the Antarctic Peninsula long before Europeans? If so, she might be the only physical evidence left of a voyage remembered by no one. Theory 4. The Lost Shipwreck. She may have been aboard a vessel lost entirely to Antarctic waters. No survivors, no reports, just a wreck swallowed by ice. Her remains, and perhaps fragments of the ship, might still be out there, locked beneath the sea. Theory 5. The Stranger Possibility. Antarctica has been isolated for over 30 million years. No permanent human presence. And yet, one body appears, without context, decades before discovery. Could there have been visitors, human or otherwise, whose presence was never meant to be recorded? Each theory opens a door, but every door leads to the same place. A young woman, alone, on the coldest continent, with no trace of how she came to be there. History likes to present itself as a clean, linear story. Dates, firsts, and milestones neatly arranged. But archaeology keeps throwing curveballs. Viking settlements in Newfoundland proved Europeans reached North America 500 years before Columbus. The remains of Kennewick Man challenged ideas about the first peoples of the Americas. Bronze Age petroglyphs in the Sahara revealed hippos and crocodiles, where today there is only desert. Each time, the first in the history books turned out to be just the first we knew about. The Antarctic woman could be another crack in that tidy facade, proof that someone reached the ice before the official story begins. And here's the unsettling part. If this is true, it means there are chapters of human movement and exploration we've completely lost. Voyages with no surviving logs. Cultures whose records never made it into colonial archives. Shipwrecks swallowed by the Southern Ocean, their crews erased from memory. Somewhere, in a dusty archive in Chile, Argentina, Britain, or Spain, there might be a logbook, a letter, or a captain's diary that quietly mentions a death on a southern beach, a burial in the ice, or a landing that history forgot to record. Until then, her presence is a hole in the timeline, a gap big enough for other truths, maybe even stranger ones, to slip through. Antarctica is melting. Each year, ice shelves retreat, permafrost thaws, and coastlines locked in ice for centuries are suddenly exposed to air and sunlight. For scientists, it's both an opportunity and a warning. Recent years have revealed perfectly preserved early 20th century explorer camps, mummified seals thousands of years old, and plant life that hasn't seen the sky since before human civilization began. If a single skull could survive on an exposed beach for nearly 2 centuries, what else might still be hidden deeper in the ice? The possibilities range from the expected: lost expedition gear, ship timbers, prehistoric animal remains, to the truly unsettling: ancient meteorites that landed before recorded history, bacteria and viruses frozen long before humans existed, or perhaps evidence of visitors who came here long before we thought anyone could, and left without a trace, save for what the ice chooses to return. But the same melting that reveals these secrets also destroys them. Once exposed, fragile remains can vanish in weeks, which means that the next time Antarctica gives up a mystery like hers, we may have only one chance to catch it before it's gone forever. Somewhere on Yamana Beach, a young woman's life ended, in a place where no one was supposed to be. No name, no ship, no story. Just a skull and scattered bones, resting where history says no human should have stood. She is alone in the record, a single anomaly that refuses to fit. Until her DNA speaks, or another discovery steps forward, she will remain the most haunting question mark in Antarctica's human history. If the ice could hide her for nearly 2 centuries, what else could it be holding? How many other lives, artifacts, or things are sealed in its depths, waiting for the right moment to reappear? Here on Stone and Bone, we'll be ready when the next secret surfaces. So hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next reveal could change everything we think we know. And here's what I want to know from you. If the ice gave back just one object tomorrow, and it could be anything from human history, or beyond it, what would you hope it is? Drop your theory below. I'll be reading them all.